Good afternoon. I'm Margaretta Ayoung. I am a consultant to UNDP, and I'm going to talk to you about a project which we've been implementing in Georgia called Developing Climate-Resilient Flood and Flash Flood Management Practices to Protect Vulnerable Communities in Georgia. The role of risk insurance in developing, so the role of risk modeling in developing the flood insurance for Georgia. I should probably start by letting you know that I'm a hydrologist, and it's been very interesting for me listening to the insurance industry, the types of products you provide, and the sorts of things that you consider when taking on a risk. What we tried to do with this project was to quantify the risk to the point where we can identify what additional risk transfer is needed within the context of a wider project. Okay, so I'm going to give a brief overview of the project so that you can see the context within which the insurance fits. Then I will talk about how we undertook flood hazard modeling and mapping and the approach to that. The flood socioeconomic modeling that was done, and all of this in underpinning the development of a weather indexed insurance model. And I will then end with some lessons learned and next steps. So the project's stated objective was to improve the resilience of highly exposed regions of Georgia to hydrometeorological threats that are increasing in intensity and frequency with climate change. And to achieve this objective, we implemented an integrated flood risk management framework, which has 5 main pillars. The first of which is to improve the enabling environment, improve the legislative and policy framework, increase institutional capacity through the transfer of technologies and capacity building, the implementation of flood protection measures, both structural measures but also non-structural measures, to enhance the preparedness by implementing a flood forecasting and early warning system, and to improve community resilience. And all of this is underpinned by risk knowledge. So the hazard and risk modeling that was done is used in absolutely all of these pillars, and I will show you. So for flood, for enhancing the legislative and policy framework, we developed a policy for zoning the use of land in floodplain. And this policy essentially determines what development is permitted in each flood zone depending on the risk level. It also includes guidance for how critical infrastructure can be made resilient to flooding. It includes, which is the second element, what resilience should be built into any development within the permitted zones in the floodplain. And to cap this off and to cap off, or to address the residual risk, we developed a flood insurance scheme. So, under the interventions, the project undertook both structural and non-structural measures. On the structural side, we implemented 21 flood defences, which again relied heavily on the risk knowledge. So the hazard and risk modeling was used to, first of all, identify where the highest priority areas were, so where the interventions are needed, but then also to prioritize them in terms of the cost benefit, so how many people will be benefiting through reduced exposure to the risk compared to the cost of implementing the structure. We also implemented softer measures such as agroforestry, so where there was agricultural land at risk, we planted in the floodplain agroforestry as a buffer to reduce that risk. And cost benefits, community-based adaptation measures where we worked with the communities to, first of all, enable them to be engaged in resilience measures. So we implemented something called an employee guarantee scheme where people employed in resilience measures have the training and the know-how to be able to do this. And then the last pillar pillar is the flood forecasting and early warning system, which was developed. We rehabilitated the hydrometric network. As you know, monitoring is key to understanding the risks. And under the Soviet era, there were extensive numbers of hydrometric equipment in the basin. 29 in all, but by the start of the project there were 4 functioning pieces of equipment. So we rehabilitated back up to the level of the 29. So the rest of the presentation will focus on essentially how the flood insurance model was built and what it is based on. So stage 1, as I said, was the development of the hazard modeling and the flood mapping, as well as the identification of the flood zones. Stage 2 is the development of a risk score calculation and the damage and loss calculation. And then the stage 3 was essentially the premium setting based on the modeled risk and also the mechanism for payout, so the index-based payout. So under flood modeling, Georgia has an association agreement with the EU and is approximating to its relevant directives, including the floods directive. So the methodology that was employed is the EU floods directive, which requires countries to assess the risk from flooding, mapping of flood extent and assets, flood extent to assets and humans. So the methodology we undertook include the use of detailed rainfall runoff modeling based on what was a very long historical data set. As I said, there had been quite a long history of monitoring in the basin. The records went back to 1935, but of course stopped around the late 1980s, some of them, and the 4 that were remaining were up to date. We also, so this is looking back, and this is being able to characterize how floods develop within the basin to be able to calibrate the model. But we also use climate change data to be able to have a climate change forward-looking scenario as well. We used soil, land use, hydrology, topography data to characterize and to fully model the hydrology. We then ran the hydrology through a hydraulic model, which is essentially the routing of the water on the floodplain. And for this, we undertook detailed 1-dimensional and 2-dimensional modeling using something called MicFlood, which you might be familiar with. And in the floodplain, because this is where we need greater resolution, we used a better DEM than we used in the hydrology. So here we used a 10-meter DEM. Ideally, we would like to have used LiDAR, and we do intend to update to LiDAR eventually. We also fully surveyed the river, so we have cross sections of the topography going through the system, and this allowed us to develop the flood maps for the return periods shown. We also did a 10,000-year model run, actually, because there are dams in the catchment, and we needed to do dam breach modeling for those. So this, as I said, allowed us to define flood zones from 1 to 6, which we will talk about in the context of the insurance. We then undertook risk modeling, where we integrated the hazard data, so the information about depth, extent, velocity, time of onset of flooding, duration of flooding, time to peak of flooding. We integrated that with receptor data, so we had information about people, property, infrastructure, and socioeconomic indicators linked to those data sets. We calculated a risk score in the, so a risk to people, risk to agriculture, risk to infrastructure, and all of this is embedded within a GIS-based model. So the risk score, as I said, is calculated based on quite a number of data and variables, including the probability of flooding, the depth of flooding, the velocity onset, information about the property, so whether it was commercial use, single or multi-story, the infrastructure length, therefore the length that is flooded, the velocity incident on the infrastructure, the agriculture type yield, and the flood seasonality. We also included a consideration for whether there was flood warning within the community, whether there were existing emergency plans within the community, the social vulnerability of each household, the duration of flood, as I said, and the extent of flooding. So damages were calculated from property risk, converted to damage as a function of the property value, the depth and velocity of flooding for houses or for properties of different types. The agricultural risk was converted to a weighted loss risk per hectare based on the yield, the producer price data, and the seasonality of the flood to represent the yield loss. So this is a map of the risk to people, risk to infrastructure, risk to agriculture. We also have risk to the natural environment, risk to heritage, risk to communication links, so roads but also communication networks were also modeled. And this is demonstrated as, aggregated up to municipality, but the model actually calculates down to the property level, and in the case of agriculture, down to each agricultural plot. And this final map is the extreme flood damages in Georgia and Malawi. As you could see, the highest risk is in the floodplain, as we would expect. This is where most people live, but it's also where there is quite a lot of agricultural land as well. So the insurance scheme was based on this very detailed information we have about risks, damages, and losses, and we wanted to develop weather-based index insurance as a financial instrument to mitigate the losses and to help replace the existing government donor intervention that happens normally after a flood. So the principles that we wanted to embed in this model is that it should equate premiums to risk exposure. It compares annual average losses with annual premiums and addresses any imbalances. It uses the river gauging that we've installed to confirm the levels and the triggers for flood zones 2 to 5, with flood zone 1 not being eligible for insurance. It works in tandem with the structural measures so that as the standards of flood protection increase, the residual risk decreases and therefore the premium applicable should decrease as well. It also works in tandem with the non-structural measures such as flood forecasting and early warning, as well as flood zoning. So in each flood zone, in addition to the permitted development, there are also policies on where flood insurance will be required. So the premium setting is based for agriculture, as I said, on the crop type. We had information about what is grown by every household which is registered within the municipalities, what the yield is, the price, and the flood seasonality, which we worked out from the hydrology. And for property category, it's based on the type of property. It's also based on information such as the foundations of the property, the foundation type, the number of occupants, and so on. And these calculations are done within each flood zone to come up with the premium. The payout principle is that of index-based insurance, and I don't have to go through the benefits of that, which we heard all of yesterday and some of it today. So it uses the river gauge to confirm whether the 2 to 5 zone flooding has occurred. It triggers the payout. The property payment is calculated based on the depth of flooding for the particular house type, and the agricultural yield is based on the flood month for the registered crop, and it results in a payout. Now, in addition to this, we also developed options for financing the scheme, ranging from the use of government subsidies to a solidarity approach where everyone pays no matter their risk, to make it affordable, because as you would expect, in the highest risk zones, the premium, in the highest risk permitted zones, the premium is quite high and unaffordable for most people, and in particular, the poorest tend to live in these highest risk zones. So we'd undertaken extensive consultations both before, during and after the development of the product, of the model. There was a lot of hesitation at the start, quite a lot of skepticism, but there was a lot of interest at the end, particularly from the insurance sector, as you would expect, and the national institutions for piloting this project. It didn't happen within the time frame of the project, and I've listed here some of the reasons which for us are the lessons learned. So in the first place, the political readiness wasn't there to push this forward. So we'd taken it this far, and we needed government to take it on and start making the relevant decisions on it. This was likely because of frequent changes and reforms with the government. It delayed the process, and UNDP is advocating on a constant basis to have this revisited. The financial commitment that was going to be required for most of the scenarios presented was seen as potentially a barrier for government wanting to take this on. And we also found that on the technical side, we had developed a single peril scheme for a single geographic location, and this was a potential drawback. In addition to this, there wasn't the technical capacity. The insurance culture in Georgia is quite underdeveloped, and we found that the insurance companies themselves lacked the technical capacity to develop the products off of the back of this model. I should also say there's a general mistrust of insurance in Georgia as well. So that was the insurance model, and I just very quickly wanted to talk about other risk transfer mechanisms. So just to summarize, in terms of where the insurance penetration is in Georgia, it's mainly in the areas of health, which is the blue stack within that diagram. And as you can see, that is actually falling, and that's because the introduction of health insurance was heavily subsidized, and the subsidies were decreased. The graph on the left is for what was a subsidized agricultural insurance scheme as well, and as you can see, the annual payouts are also decreasing, and that's because the subsidies were decreased and therefore uptake was decreased as well. This final slide just shows that there has been a project in Georgia to develop the natural hazard loss assessment to support the recovery system, and this is to classify all natural hazards based on the INSPIRE directive, to develop the physical indicators for loss, and to develop the human and economic indicators, the assessment methodology and questionnaire, provide training and so on, and this is to support the recovery stage. I will end by telling you what the next steps are. Essentially, the Rioni project was successfully scaled up to GCF. Funding was secured in February, and the project will start very soon. This will be a nationwide project scaling up basically all the elements of the integrated flood risk management framework that was introduced, but it would also be extended to other hazards. So as part of this new project, we will have the full understanding of hazards and risks in Georgia. They will be mapped, they will be modeled, and this will be the basis for project interventions. Importantly, it will provide the enabling environment and the climate risk information basis for further development of any consideration of an insurance scheme. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Before handing over the panel to Mr. Kellett, I just want to add out that it was a big privilege to facilitate such a panel. I look very much forward to detailed, effective and fruitful dialogue which we are planning to have with the audience divided into 3 sub-regions. Over there, on the door, please make a note for the rooms where to attend. And from technical perspective, just wanted to add up as I was professional, we do have a unique possibility, quintessentially, to skip the period of probably 8 to 15 years which other territories and other regions spend in developing of sovereign risk transfer solutions. So I think it is really important to find convenient ways for each country, each sub-region to the sovereign risk transfer. And thank you very much. Mr. Keller?
Yes, unfortunately, I don't think we have time for questions because we're already 20 minutes over. Is that going to be okay? Is your facility? Or do you want to take it? Do you want to take the opportunity for 1 or 2 questions? We have to be very quick.
Well, maybe if there are some questions for the rest, for the speakers, which we had in the second part, welcome. And let's see how long it's going to take.
Hi, Robert. Question to Daniel, and I'm looking for more for a general statement, otherwise I probably would have to ask more precisely. I'm sure the modeling agencies are looking into these territories of the 17 countries here. How far are the modeling agencies on their way to produce models which can be used for risk transfer?
A very good question. I'll just wait for my mic to come on. And what's the crisp answer? Speaking just for RMS, we do not have any commercially available models for the region in the market. Okay? However, RMS does have lots of models that are not yet commercially available behind the scenes. We just haven't released them because there hasn't been a demand for them. I want to answer your question partly with reference to Kira and skipping 5 to 15 years, and partly to say, with reference to something I said in my presentation, which is fitness for purpose. Developing a model which will support an ILS transaction is, if you know what you're doing, for certain perils, not particularly difficult. And while, by one measure, where are we? 0, because we haven't released anything. What's my confidence that we could develop something relatively quickly? That's pretty high. Why hasn't it been developed? Demand-led. So if any of the countries in the room was to express an interest of going down this path, then we would mobilize very quickly and we would be confident that we can deliver on that in a short space of time.
One point. Yeah. Well, absolutely agree with Daniel, because coming up with a pretty sophisticated model, or for that matter, to start with, a simple model for the region is not a problem. It's the biggest problem actually convinced the governments in the region that this type of insurance is needed. And again, I think Kirill Belinsky talked about that in his presentation. Probably or just maybe I'm just mixing with discussions that we had in private. It's probably easier to start convincing the governments if you offer them a product which is more like they are accustomed to, and that doesn't look as different from initiatives that they already have in place.
Can I just add one quick point? My microphone comes on. Which is, it's far easier to build a model for a region than it is for one country, then the next country, then the next country. That's how models are built. So our flood model is a pan-European flood model. We didn't just go and build a China typhoon model, we built a model for typhoon across the entire basin. Because you need to understand the hazard at that kind of scale, because earthquakes and windstorms and floods don't care about geopolitical boundaries. So if we think about generating the demand maps that is required, and again this is a point I think you brought up earlier, Kirill, that at a regional level, while that's harder to organise, it creates more complexity of intergovernmental relationships. But if the will was there at a regional level, then that would be so much easier and much more viable to deliver. Because frankly, to build a model just for one country would require us to understand the hazard across multiple countries. And so that would be my wish, that of course any country could come to us individually, but would be far better if, as a group or a subgroup, where it makes sense around certain hazards, were to come and say, yes, we would like to do this, and then we would move very quickly.
If I may just add up a little bit, we've got quite a large region over here, but let's face it, we are very uniquely located, and for example, countries of Central Asia have same perils, same exposure, and it could allow, first of all, let's face it, first of all, it's a saving of expenses, because having a sub-regional model will be cheaper for each and every sovereign than developing it for itself. Second, quite uniquely, geographically, countries prone to same kind of perils, same kind of exposures. As I mentioned, it's earthquake for Central Asia, definitely it's earthquake for Caucasus, it's floods and earthquake for Balkans, and we need to use this unique position quite wisely and make life easier for everybody.
Can I just shout at that? No.
Can you hear me? Just a quick comment to what Daniel said. When basically, the private sector, we respond to demand. And this demand needs to be there. And it's not simply demand, it's demand which is able to pay for the services which we provide. So, I think it might be helpful if I bring an example of rating agencies. So, you very familiar that if you issue your bond, you need a rating agency to rate it. You will be paying for rating agency to do the work. Once again, here, it's slightly more complicated, but still you need to pay the modeling agency to model the risks from which rating agencies will rate the bonds. It's a cost to the issuance. This cost can be shared, but this cost is faced up front. Slightly more complication here arises because you need to know the exposure before you decide to issue. To know the exposure, you need to have the model, and to have the model, somebody else needs to pay. Or you pay, but you probably find it difficult to pay because you don't know if you want to spend money there. So that's why it's important to have donors and international agencies and developing agencies to make the first step. It's very small, it's actually not very expensive step to pay for the model or to pay for the initial development consulting prior to the extending real cost for the whole insurance. Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's understandable.
Building on what Daniel said at the beginning, the language problem. And I thought these presentations were very, very interesting. And my question is basically, I mean, do we have a language problem here? Because, Daniel, you were talking about model, and we just had a great example of a model that was built in Georgia, and the issues with it. Now, are we talking about the same thing here? I mean, can we also, I felt the approach on the models are slightly different. And whilst, you know, the models from RMS may be much closer to, you know, the insurance industry and have been proven to transfer risks, I think the model that UNDP has developed in Georgia is perhaps closer to the communities and to the underground, also trying to understand.
Move forward in this type of analysis. So in terms of takeaways and the results of this exercise, state budget finance is critical, but we need more sophisticated treatment of the fiscal data if we really want to link these flows to sustainable development, SDGs, and SENDA implementation. ODA still matters in some countries. For the upper middle income countries, it's obviously a very small number, but in countries like Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, Moldova, Kosovo as a territory, Georgia, it's significant. And interestingly, those are countries that have relatively large shares and territories that have relatively large shares, not only of ODA, but also remittances. And this then leads to the next point. This underscores the importance of blending finance and figuring out ways to use ODA to bring more remittances into development activities, for example, as well as budget finance in this respect. In terms of the commercial flows, foreign direct investment, bank flows are generally larger than the flows associated with purchases and sales of stocks and bonds and financial services. Now, in the countries that have the largest share of finance for development in the commercial flows, such as Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, it's important to point out that most of these flows go into the extractive sector. So in that sense, the numbers may be a little bit biased if you want to finance development in some other respect besides investing in the gas or oil sector. So I thank you very much for your attention. I apologize for going through this relatively quickly, but it will bring us that much closer to the
Thank you very much, Ben, for your rapid review of all the countries. I think there's a story within each of those countries which will be very interesting. And also the trends over time, 2008, financial crisis and how that impacted on countries and FDI and other things would be something. I'm sure the countries can come to you directly to get some of that information if they probably knows already, but if they don't or would like some external thoughts. Now I'd like to go on to my colleague Ina, who's going to give us a bit of a perspective from the partnerships view and see how relevant that is for the region here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. I will also, I know that I'm really the one standing between you and lunch, so really rush through this and have to take any questions or anything. But we really wanted to now kind of segue from what Ben was saying about the financing flows to actually say, well, how do we catalyze this? What's needed? And for that, for us, you know, one of the transformational pieces of the SDGs, the partnership one, is essential. It's where we bring all the different actors together in a way that can actually unlock the financing potential for all aspects of the SDGs, but in this particular case, for things like DRR. So the whole financing framework for us is essential. It's, again, going beyond the ODA element that Ben was looking for, that Ben was mentioning earlier, and looking at really all sorts of financing flows that can actually unlock the potential to fund things like DRR work. So So, you know, it's really about also accessing partners that we traditionally haven't accessed to the developing world, and actually convincing them that, you know, they're also not only financial, but also